You are listening to the Enormocast.
Squamish by Sportiva. A shoe for climbers who are not afraid to ascend. Climbing obsession.
Why are you so obsessed?
Squamish. Squamish vegan. Precision. Stability. Squamish vegan. Skin-like.
Why are you so obsessed?
What would you do for the send?
What would you do for the send?
Squamish by Sportiva. Squamish.
What would you do for the send?
Elevate your sending with the Squamish, and elevate your consciousness with the Squamish vegan. All the sending without the animal-derived materials. Find the Squamish at Sportiva.com or your favorite local shop. Squamish.
What would you do for the send?
Does your neck hurt playing someone else's project? Does your partner get in way over his head even on the warm-ups? Does the phrase, "I'll just do this move one more time," make your eyeballs spin? Then let Belay Specs fight for you.
When my boyfriend started falling lower and lower on his project, Belay Specs saved my neck and got me a new boyfriend.
Belayer neck pain, also known as BNP, can interfere with work, play, family, and snapping your head around at the gym to check out those abs. So if your neck has been injured in an epic belay session, go to belayspecs.com to see if you qualify for a pair of belay specs
And to get what you deserve.
Enter Enormocast at checkout for a discount. Belay Specs is not licensed to give legal advice to anyone. Results may vary by steepness. If Belay Specs cause you to trip, fall down, run into a door, nausea, dry mouth, you're probably too high to climb to begin with.
Listen, where are you playing in town? Are you playing here?
We're doing the Enormo Dome, whatever it is. It's terrific.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
a
big
house. We
place
sold
that
it
side
out.
of town. That's a
Very
big
nice.
place. You sold
What's
it
that,
out.
2006?
I'll see.
We really should.
Look, you better get up there before you panic. Those pens are loose. You're very good. I have really enjoyed climbing with you. We'll make it.
I don't think so. But we shall continue with style. Good weather, bad weather. Now or later, anytime for climbing.
Today's show is brought to you by La Sportiva and with support from Maxim Ropes. Maxim has been keeping the Enormocast off the deck since 2012.
And don't forget our charter sponsor, Bonfire Coffee. Go to bonfirecoffee.com and enter Enorma at checkout for a discount on great coffee and to support the Enormocast.
And now back to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Enormocast. This is your host, Chris Kalous. It is February 4th, 2025, about 10:30 a.m. here in Colorado, and this is episode 301 of the Enormocast, a conversation with alpinist Quentin Roberts. In other news, just got back from the Winona Ice Fest. Great time out there on the Mississippi in Winona. Really great time. I was sort of lamenting booking 2 ice fests in 2 weeks, but it was totally worth it in Winona. Michigan is up next. I want to thank Eric Barnard at Big River Climbing Guides for inviting me out there. You may remember Eric from way back at episode 99, I think. Anyway, he spent the last decade trying to transform Winona into this outdoor town, adding this crazy ice park that just sits right there above town. Kind of a wild experience. Everybody I met in town seems to love it, and it's an amazing resource. And I had a great time hanging out with Eric, now a friend of mine, and meeting all of his ice farmers. Great group of people keeping that resource alive. So if you want more information about the Winona Ice Park or climbing in that general area, hit up Eric. He's on Instagram at Big River Climbing Guides. Totally awesome scene up there. Now it's off to Michigan. Okay, and I also want to do a little advertising for an Enormocast adjacent event coming up February 20th, 2025 in Boulder, Colorado. The Run Out podcast, the other podcast, the one I do with Andrew Bisharat. Most of you are probably aware of it. I hope most of you also listen to it, although maybe that much Caloose is too much Caloose. It is possible to get too much Caloose. Just ask my wife. It sounded like one of those 1950s style comedians. Anyway, we have some stuff planned. Chris Parker's going to be there playing some music. You've heard Chris Parker here on the Enormocast. We also have Matt Samet coming on, also a former guest on the Enormocast, and obviously his name and reputation precede him. And Kelly Cordes was coming, but there has been a conflict. He has been replaced, and I think he's been replaced by perhaps even a better guest. We've got Nellie Milfeld coming in. And who is Nellie? Well, Cedar Wright is her husband. And though Cedar kind of gets a lot of heat in the climbing world, Nellie is also an amazing climber, an amazing woman, smart, funny, and I think she's going to be an awesome guest. When we had Kelly booked, it was an all-boys show. We've upped the estrogen level a little bit, which is always a good thing. So check that out. It's going to be in Boulder, Colorado, Chautauqua Community House. You can go to chautauqua.com to get tickets. February 20th, we're also going to be announcing a little after party for that. Sort of a meet and greet there in Boulder. Small place, intimate setting, some music, some chatting. Should be a lot of fun. Once again, chautauqua.com for tickets. And if it goes well, maybe we'll come to your town. And I'm not joking about that. World tour. I never did tour with any of the bands I was in. This is my chance. Finally, the last thing to say is don't bug me about the show formerly known as TAPS. We're changing the name to Last Rites this year. Yeah, we're running a little bit late, but you know what? The other people decided to do dry January, so, what the hell? We'll just book it in February so we can get past that. I did not, luckily, because my trip to Winona was very much less than dry. Anyhow, it's coming up. Hold your horses. The recording is booked in a couple days, so it should be out just after this one. And this one's great. This one is great. So don't worry about where FKA TAPS is. Okay, let's talk about Quentin Roberts. Quentin Roberts is an alpinist, maybe not as famous as a lot of other guys in his game, but he should be. The guy is super accomplished, super amazing climber, a deep thinker. I got this interview in August, actually, at the Arc'teryx Academy up in Squamish. Arc'teryx was very generous in bringing me up there to interview some folks and just to make the scene. Despite the fact that they don't sponsor the show and actually compete with some other sponsors on the show, they said, we don't care. We love the Enormocast. Come on up. We'll take care of you. And you can get in front of some of our guys. And Quentin was immediately on the list. We have a bunch of mutual friends. So it was an easy decision to sit down with Quentin. And what we got was a really deep, thoughtful, and kind of heavy podcast. Part of talking to alpinists sometimes is talking about the hard part of alpinism, which is accidents and losing your friends. It's just part of the world that they tread in, and we got into it. One other thing I want to say about the timeline of this is the fact that 6 months went by between getting this and putting it out means that one of the people we talk about in the show, we talk about him briefly, Mike Gardner, passed away in the interim. Mike fell to his death on Janu, climbing with his longtime partner, Sam Hennessy. So I kind of debated leaving the little section in there where we actually talk about Quentin's desire to do a trip with Mike, someone who he'd become friends with because of the Arc'teryx team. It's a very tight-knit team. Several of my friends are on the team, and it's amazing to look into that group of people and see how tight they become working together as athletes. I asked Quentin if I should leave it in. We decided that we should because it's just sort of a mention of a friend, a mention of how much Quentin wanted to spend some time with Mike, and just punctuates that loss a little bit. So I just wanted to give you a warning. We actually talk about a lot of death in this thing. It was just a mellow day. That's where we went with it all. Rest in peace, Mike Gardner. If you want to hear more about Mike, of course, there's his Enormocast from a couple of years ago. Also, an amazing article, An Alpinist, that he wrote not long before his death called Worth the Wait. He was also on the Alpinist podcast, So yeah, a lot of ways to connect with Mike, even though he's gone. He was a tremendous guy, sweet, sort of gentle despite being tough as nails. Yeah, the loss is still being felt. And of course, Quentin Roberts is cut from much of the same cloth. So let's get to this talk on a rainy afternoon in Squamish with Quentin Roberts.
I think it's cool to see that technical climbing at altitude is kind of seeing a resurgence, and instead of like doing things fast, now lots more people seem to be doing like technical things, taking them slower, harder things, and taking them to higher altitude, because that's been, most of the stuff that I've done is not at 8,000 meters at all. It's like 6,000 meters in the technical realm, but it's always been a dream to go and do hard technical climbing at altitude. I don't know if that's a crazy one or not, it's dangerous country. But yeah, it's cool to see those guys. What they did on Janya is totally wild and awesome. I'm glad they're all alive, And the same thing with what Tom and Alice just did on G3, those kind of routes. It's cool to see them happen.
It's like a resurgence in a way, but there's like they are slower than like what the kind of fashion has been of the last like decade, but they're still like fast compared to, the olden times.
Thanks to our gear, I think. Yeah, but I think more like they're spending the night on the mountain. Yeah, they're like really like letting the energy of the mountain sink in. At least for me personally, like when I try and do things super fast, it's really fun and you feel the fitness and the burn, and moving fast is fun. But in terms of like really connecting with the environment, it's a bit harder to do. Like I think suffering and shivering at night is a better way to connect with your environment.
That's what you tell yourself while you're doing it.
I'm
just connecting to my environment.
I'm not telling myself, I'm feeling it.
You're feeling it. This is great. Yeah. Hello, mountain.
Yeah. Just freeze me.
So, I mean, have you ever climbed at that altitude?
8,000? No, I've never been to 8,000 meters. I've always wanted to, and I felt like it would be good to go and do a hike up an 8,000 meter mountain at some point, but that whole industry really doesn't appeal to me at all, and all the normal routes are kind of chaos. So yeah, we'll see. I will at some point in my life see how I do at that kind of altitude, hopefully.
How high have you been?
6,500 meters, so not even 7.
And so how's your just general like appreciation for that?
That's good.
I've
been doing okay. Yeah, I've been doing good there, but things change a lot with another 1,500 meters.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, technical climbing at 6,500 meters or in the 6,000 meter range is a really awesome kind of window, because you can definitely still climb quite hard. But the guys on Janu were saying that they were doing like pretty cool hard moves, and able to do like hard moves, and I find this at 6,000 or whatever too, is that you can do really hard cruxes. You just have to be able to stop and recover afterwards, or just like stop and pant for 10 minutes or whatever if it's really been hard. And so then you can actually, like, in terms of like technical difficulty, you can actually free climb pretty well and pretty hard at altitude, as long as you can recover and you're sort of planning that out as you go.
I mean, I saw their program in Michigan, and it looked like they were climbing pretty hard.
Yeah, totally.
Like, it wasn't
the photos look
just
like,
humping up snow, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's wild, like big 400 meter face like that high up there. It's cool. It's a really cool line. Yeah. For me, I'm drawn to like I would be really psyched on like a big sustained line that's just steep, and you go through the altitude through climbing it as, if you're thinking of, I don't know, other routes like the stuff on Nuptse maybe. No, I don't think that's a good example. There isn't really any examples at that high of an altitude, So it's that's the unexplored territory of alpine climbing. I think that would be cool to explore for humans, but also it's like we don't actually know if we can do it yet.
Right.
West face of Markalu, like Steve House and Marco Prezel tried it, Sortov tried it, and those kind of things are like still to be done.
Right on.
We'll see. We'll see if it's me. I'm not sure. I have to know if I can climb at 8,000 meters or not, and it's going to be a while in the future. And right now I need to get more psyched too, because I had some close calls in Patagonia, and I'm kind of freaked out these days, but that'll change.
Yeah, well, let me ask you.
About those?
Yeah.
I had an anchor fail with a friend when we were coming down from the east face of Cerro Torre, and then I was soloing Los Tiempos Perdidos and pulled a piece of gear that I was weighting, and so I took a pretty big fall there too. both quite unexpected. Like the anchor failure was because I didn't inspect it properly. Both were mistakes for sure. But at the same time, we do make mistakes. I think it's important to recognize that. So I'm scared because I know that I'm going to make another mistake, and I'm trying my hardest not to, but it's just a reality. Obviously, I'm going to be way more on my anchors and everything now. I would have said that I'm pretty on my anchors anyway. Yeah, it was 3 cams and a big feature of rock that was used for a rescue in a previous year. And luckily that anchor was attached to a fixed rope that went higher up. And I loaded the anchor, sort of tested it, but didn't really. I sat on it with my own body weight. Then my partner came down and hung on it. And then I started wrapping with the whole bag, which is super heavy. So I think maybe me and the whole bag and maybe that extra different angle from stepping down into, it was the last rappel, going down to the schrund, the anchor popped and this huge block, I don't know, 2 those modern big fridge freezer combos together or something, landed on his foot and smashed his climbing boot, but the climbing boot saved his foot for sure. And smashed his foot up pretty good too. He was in shock and couldn't walk or anything. And then came down and smoked me with my whole bag. And somehow the whole bag absorbed most of the impact and I was okay. But it could have been totally different. And if we didn't have that fixed rope, then we would have been in the schrund too, So it was an eye-opener. And it was right at the end of the push too. We did this sick push on the mountain, came down, last rappel. Our homies were on the glacier, dancing and playing cumbia. And I think that's why I kind of switched off a little bit.
Oh, man. Yeah, right.
It's because we're there, last rappel, homies are down there, we're going to be down there soon. And I had been so on it for every rappel the whole way down, putting extra wires in, fixing them up. And yeah, it's just that last one. I don't know, but that's how it goes.
Right. Did you basically have to rescue your buddy then?
Yeah, we did. We had the G7 pods. We were using the pods on the face and they were perfect. It was really wild we were lucky, we put him on the pod, we tied him in really good and then we dragged him on the glacier. And then when we got off the glacier, we carried him a little bit down through the seracs and stuff. Got to a SAM splint and splinted his foot up really good. And then he crawled all the way down to where the heli could pick him up. It was a bit of an epic crawl. Had huge holes in his pants and his knees. And yeah, but it was good. We stayed in good spirits the whole time. And it was really lucky. Those friends that were playing music and dancing on the glacier, it was really lucky we had them because then there was 4 of us there that could rescue him.
I assume they stopped playing music and dancing.
Oh yeah, they were at the schrund in seconds.
Right.
They saw it all happen, right. Oof, and then they came straight to help.
Oh man,
yeah, it was wild. It was a wild one, and I feel like those things can happen, and fortunately, I'm still alive, and I've had some of those things happen, several. A long time ago, I was in an avalanche, and I've had some close calls, but I would say kind of spaced out and not. To have that full soloing on Los Tiempos Perdidos right after, that was kind of what really rung the fear home, because it's just back to back. And I've been this last few years really climbing a ton, alpine climbing a ton and just chasing another sick thing. And I've got all these sick projects that are so cutting edge, but they're big projects for me and they demand a lot. And in some ways, they demand an acceptance of a lot of risk too. And so, yeah, thinking about how many of those things I really want to be doing all the time and all of those things. So right now I've got that question in my head a lot. I'm trying to think about where my North Star, I was just saying, my North Star is 8,000 meter technical climbing. Hopefully I'm doing M8 roof pulls, in theory, the North Star, the distant North Star. And but I have to reevaluate that a little bit, or at least how I'm going to get there.
Right.
Because I want to get there, but I want to be alive first and foremost,
Yeah, so. Well, I got to keep pushing on this because, one of the things that kept coming up looking at your climbing is also soloing, and not just rope soloing, but free soloing. Mm-hmm. And so it's it's an interesting thing to hear someone like yourself start to think about or
my
talk
mortality.
openly about risk. Because I think from the outside looking in, it seems like you're a bit immune to it.
Yeah,
when it comes to some of this stuff.
That. Yeah, and I'm not immune to it at all.
Well,
sometimes you are. Sometimes if you have a close call or something, if you're soloing and you have a sketchy moment or something like that. Sometimes those moments, if you're not careful, you don't hear them. You can kind of just keep going and block them out. Which I basically, because this happened in Patagonia in January, and now it's the middle of the summer, and I've really only been processing it this last 3 weeks or this last month, And so you just have to. It's a funny thing, yeah. I think our minds are very good at blocking horrible experiences out or scary experiences out, and that can be a detriment. We really have to listen to the mountains when they talk to us, right?
Right. How old are you?
I'm 32 now.
32. Okay.
Yeah.
It's starting to make sense. The 20s, man.
Yeah, dude.
The 20s are a hell of a drug, as they say.
Oh man, yeah. It was a wild ride, those 20s, yeah. And it's hopefully still is going to be one. But yeah, it's different. It's different for sure. The early 30s, I feel like I have my perspective on life in general has changed a lot. I also broke up with a long-term girlfriend who I had through my 20s, and she was like a really powerful anchor in that time. So even though my life was like super wild and crazy, she provided a lot of stability that I think I didn't really recognize until we broke up. And then so that too, in going into my 30s and like suddenly like having all this opportunity climbing and being able to go wherever I want, whenever I want. Yeah, it was a crazy combo. So I went from like, it was a wild 20s for sure. But then when we broke up and in my early 30s, I kind of suddenly had all this opportunity, and I've always had like a huge fire to go climbing, and I could do it properly without having to do tree work or other work, you know? And I did it, and it's been crazy. And now I'm like sitting here like, whoa, that was wild. And what am I going to do next? You know?
Right. Can I interest you in a country club membership or something?
Yeah,
like that?
yeah. Maybe I'll start golf, lawn bowling. Lawn bowling's always interested me. Yeah.
Oh, it has.
No, not at all. I don't even
that
know
would be the next thing. Like we've gone hard already, but I have this phrase in here that you used somewhere. I pulled it out of something that you said. That like part of alpine climbing is a confrontation of the ego. Do you remember saying that?
Climbing in general.
That? Yeah. And I mean, it seems like that's tied into this somehow. Again, this idea of listening to what happened or listening to these signals and not ignoring your mortality, so to speak, the way you can when you're maybe younger or when you're in that mode. Yeah. Can you sort of explain that at all? Like what you're thinking when you talk about that?
Like with the mortality thing, I definitely don't think, well, I hope to think that I've never really ignored it. I had some experiences like pretty early on that showed me how dangerous what I was doing was. Instead, I would say that I'm just accepting it. And I think in general, in alpine climbing, people don't really accept that they're taking risk, and they don't. And if they're not, either that or they don't know that they're taking risk. Because like if we go out there, even if you're rock climbing, you know, like I've had giant chunks of rock fall off at the crag. No one's wearing helmets. Like there's just a million ways shit can go wrong. And I think for us to like get out there and just pretend like they're doing the safe thing, or I never go soloing, so I'm safe, is bullshit. You know, like it's dangerous. That's just the way it is. And for sure, what I do is more dangerous. But I accept that, and that's the difference. You know, like. And I have up until this point accepted my mortality. I recognize that like if everything goes south, I'm gonna, it could go really bad, you know. I don't want that obviously, but it's something that I think we have to recognize. And with the ego thing, the ego is huge. I think I did like most of my major ego processing in my early 20s. Like I was rock climbing a ton and trying to get better and better and better. And then I stopped getting better than I was on this like super steep progression curve, and eventually that progression curve like teetered off a little bit, and I started, you go on an alpine climbing expedition, you come back, you're way less fit. And I've never actually like put in consistent year-round rock progression training, which would be cool to do. But anyway, in my early 20s, I was training, I was climbing a ton. I didn't feel like I was improving as much as I wanted, and every time I couldn't do something that I wanted to do, I'd lose it, you know. And it was just this, I really had to think about why I was losing it. Then the reason is because you want to do it. And why do you want to do it? Because you got to like, why do you want, I don't know, why do you want to do it so bad that you're getting mad that you can't do it, right? And so that was a really cool part of the process for me. And that was specifically like sport climbing and bouldering and rock climbing. It wasn't actually alpine climbing, but obviously it translates to alpine climbing too. And you see like why you want to do the objective. And if it's to get to the top of the boulder rather than to do the moves that get you to the top of the boulder, it's like a totally different perspective in terms of your ego and why you're doing what you're doing, and a really liberating one to just like remember that you're here to climb, not to get to the top. You're here to just enjoy being in Hampi in India, like eating awesome food and yogurt and going bouldering in the morning and the evening, and if you top out a sick boulder, you do, and that's awesome. And all the times that I've done the hardest things, like I've never had those expectations, and I don't think ego has really ever been a part of it, including soloing in the mountains too. Like whenever I go soloing, I take it really seriously and I meditate and I listen to myself and I try and make sure that I'm doing it because I love being in that environment and the landscape. And even in Patagonia recently with this accident, I was really, really happy to be there, you know? And when the accident happened, I was really happy to be there too. And I was really thankful for the experience. I had to get out of there. I had in the end, I had actually kind of broken my ankle a little bit and really hurt my knee. So it was pain in the ass to get
soloing
it.
accident, the piece.
The other one, yeah, I didn't actually.
You took like a big ass fall.
Yeah, 20 meters or something, the tomahawky one.
Right.
And I had crampons and ice axes, and my ankle, I think, got it's just a little micro fracture or something, but my front point on the crampon snagged. Mm-hmm. So, but
well, when you were this person obsessed more with rock climbing, was that in Canmore? Were you in the Bow Valley or
Skaha in the Okanagan? I was in university.
Oh, okay.
That you kind of just that time period. Right. Yeah, my big it was in Humpy, the time where I really feel like I first digested that was my first oh wait, I got to think about why I'm doing this properly now, because before that I was just doing it. I loved it. I've always loved it. No question, just go. Don't even think about why, because it's the best thing in the world and you're just climbing. And then suddenly I started having less fun and I had to think about why, you know. And then I found out how to have fun again, basically. I just figured out why I was climbing and then focused on that instead of the outcome, you know. Talking about ego and climbing is really interesting because it goes beyond that too. That's a very obvious sign of the ego, I think, if you're just trying to achieve something so that you can say that you got to the top of something hard and that's how you look around your friends or whatever. But if you're thinking about it from more of the perspective of why do you do it? Especially alpine climbing is something that's dangerous or something like that. Why do you do it to the people around you? It's such a selfish thing for you to do. And in terms of ego and selfishness being correlated, there's definitely a lot of ego then. If you consider selfishness ego, then for sure alpine climbing is a super selfish pursuit. And it's a really powerful selfish pursuit. You know, for me, it's completely changed my life and my perspective on life and the world. I'm really thankful for it. But yeah, I mean, I did it for myself. I didn't do it for someone else, and I'm not doing it for someone else either, and I never will be. That's kind of what's so cool about it at the same time. But yeah, we have to remember it's selfish.
Going back just a little bit, you were kind of the super international kid.
Yeah,
sounds like your folks were teachers, I think, in international schools and things like that. Time in Wales as a little kid, a little stint in Germany, South Africa is kind of where you kind of were a preteen or post.
I was 15, it was 15 to 17 in South Africa, yeah.
But somewhere in there I read about you being off, I think in Germany somewhere, in some very sort of snobby school or something that. Yeah, and you said, I didn't fit in. Everything, I think you said everything sucked about it.
Yeah.
Except that it was by some mountains.
Yeah, it was by some mountains, and because it was such a snobby school, they had 2 mountain guides, or one guide and one apprentice guide employed at the school.
Oh, okay.
They were head of the climbing team. And then there were 3 of us kids that were super into it. And they would take us into the Alps, you know, on glaciers and climbing in the Dolomites. And it was every second weekend we'd go into the Alps. And I was that back then, I was 13, you know, and I was getting exposed to all this crazy stuff. I had no idea what I was doing. I don't remember any of the routes. I was just getting yarded up behind this guide, Herr Schäfer, he was called. And yeah, I don't know. It's just really lucky. I'm really thankful for that. But it was really intense. The peer pressure at that school was wild. And the most of any school that I've, went to when I was a kid. I was in South Africa in school and UK in school. But yeah, that one in Germany was an intense one.
Well, it sounds too that there was the South African part. There was a bit. I just noticed skateboarding.
Yeah.
And it's just, I think it's traditionally that the kids that don't fit in, they find skateboarding, they can find climbing.
Totally.
In some places of the world, they find surfing,
Yeah, I did surf in South Africa too, actually.
And so it's kind of I see this sort of through line of a kid that was not necessarily fitting into what they needed.
No,
but
I've never fit in. I still don't fit in. But, it's okay. It's kind of fun not to fit in. Back then in South Africa, I was super into skateboarding, way more than climbing. But skateboarding was keeping me on the street smoking and doing stupid shit. And my parents were really wanting me not to be on the streets doing that, so they were pushing climbing. Yeah, I've always loved climbing, and I've always done it, but back then it was definitely something that I would do through school, and my parents encouraged and those kind of things. But South Africa was also the first time where I climbed independently with my buddies. I knew how to go clip bolts and lead climb and wrap in and in Cape Town the sport climbing is really, really good. So it was like that was my introduction to sport climbing. I did have a ton of fun doing it, but yeah, all through those years, like from the age of 9 to 17 or whenever I moved to Canada, I was just like skate head. I just loved skateboarding and I didn't want to do anything else.
That's funny. That's like your parents are like, no, climbers
like,
don't.
What do you
climbers
think about
don't
going to the gym tonight?
Yeah, but climbers don't smoke weed or anything. Let's send them with the climbers. They're like, sure, we don't smoke weed. It's fine.
Yeah, we're totally good. Yeah, I know, exactly. He'll be fine with us. Come here, Quentin. Little do they know, I just have 2 subcultures that are totally awesome subcultures.
I think, it's a little healthier.
Yeah.
The climbing versus the skaters. The skaters, it can be rough out there. For sure. That's interesting. Do you like still run a deck somewhere?
I've actually got 2 right now. John Price just came back from Canmore and I didn't realize that. I've totally forgotten that I'd given him one, so now I've got 2 and I'm all psyched. But yeah, I do still. I started again during the pandemic actually. For like from the age of 17 when I came to Canada until the pandemic, I didn't skate. And I started in the pandemic and I've fallen in love again. It's like it's way easier to go get in a little bit of flow state without getting changed or without going to the gym. And you can do it for like 15 minutes quick or have a quick game of skate with your buddy or just go in session in the skate park for like hours. But all of that is like really easy access. I love the community and it's beautiful to step outside of the climbing community too. Because I'm so in the climbing community now, And so going to the skate park, I'm like, hi, I'm Quentin. And I don't have to say anything else. I don't have to say I'm a climber. I just go skateboarding with people I don't know. And it's cool. I enjoy that a lot. So I've been doing it, since the pandemic.
Do you ever get out with Gardner?
Yeah, we've gotten out. Usually during like Arc'teryx events and stuff like that, we get out. But we've never gotten... It would be fun to get out with him. He skates a very different style from me. Like I learned in South Africa and we didn't have skate parks. We just had dry bowls and like very street kind of like stairs and rails and ledges and stuff. And Gardner's had a park his whole life and skated it his whole life. And he's a total boss on all the ramps. And I'm not as good at the transition-y stuff. We have a different style, which would be sick. I haven't asked him yet, but I want to go to Scotland with Gardner. It'd be really fun and do some winter climbing and then skate in Edinburgh and Glasgow. Those are some cool cities to skate. It'd be really sick to skate them, but yeah, we'll see.
Dude, that's a film project right there.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool idea, yeah.
Because like even last night, or I hear this all the time, but I think somebody said it last night about like, oh, this is sort of skate inspired. And then I've,
they keep it real.
Some of the zines, like the little climbing zines that come from that skate culture.
Yeah,
so,
it's kind of gotten popular.
It would be pretty cool to do. Because there's not a lot of really good climbers or that I know of that are also like as good as like Gardner is anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know what your skills are like, but
right. They're definitely not pro.
But I think that'd be a great actual movie. Like,
yeah, it would be really fun.
Yeah.
I think it would be an awesome movie too.
Yeah, we'll pitch it.
Yeah.
Arc'teryx will do it.
Yeah.
You just had the skate guys talk about the shoes. No, he'll do it.
Yeah.
Anything that makes a guy look cool is he's down for that. Well, cool. I just kind of was wondering about like, it's your interesting kid. You lived an interesting life that most kids don't. You're moving around the country and everything else. Leading up to this sort of stuff, there was a point at which you took, in your own words, you took the reins of your own climbing. Yeah, can you talk a little bit about that? Like, you're dabbling, and then you're part of the community rock climbing, and I think you end up in Vancouver at some point. In high school or something like that, and then maybe over to Canmore at some point. So where does that all fit in? That you quote unquote took the reins.
Yeah, I all through basically until I moved to Canada, I had always had a climbing mentor of some kind. In South Africa, I was really lucky to have some of like the forefront sport climbers mentoring me when I was climbing in South Africa. But then when I came to Canada, I didn't know anybody that climbed. One of the teachers at the school at my high school was a climber, and we kind of started a climbing activity together. It felt like for the first time I was the one that was kind of leading that, and I was teaching other, my classmates and stuff. And we built a little climbing wall on the campus that I was going to. And yeah, that was kind of like where I felt like, okay, now it's my thing. I'm teaching other people this thing. And also that was definitely where I decided that climbing is what I wanted to do. In high school, I decided I was like, I'm going to become a mountain guide, because I thought that was how I'd be able to climb all the time. And then after high school, I went out to the Rockies to try and do that and decided I didn't want to be a mountain guide. I did a bit of hiking, guiding around Lake Louise and stuff, and it just wasn't for me. And I realized quickly not to. And so that's why I went to university in the Okanagan, which is where I was like sport climbing, and then eventually I moved out to Canmore again after uni in the Okanagan.
And when did you graduate in your head to, or in reality to quit futzing around with this rock climbing stuff and get into the big mountains?
So when I first went out to become a guide, I was climbing a little bit at the back of the lake, and we actually established a couple of routes close to the lodge I was working at. But most of the time I was just scrambling all of the mountains around. Like I scrambled every mountain you can see from Numtaja Lodge, which is the lodge I was working at the time. I didn't have a car, so I just like walk and hitchhike and go climb as many as I could, or hike as many as I could, really. Like definitely some technical scrambling, but mostly just hiking and peak bagging or whatever. So I came into alpine climbing kind of from that angle. I had been rock climbing, obviously, and technical climbing the whole time. Similarly, around that time was when I started ice climbing. And in those years, I kind of feel like I was doing them separately. So I was like scrambling, I was rock climbing. I wasn't really bouldering back then, and I was ice climbing. And then Chris, my buddy that I told you about earlier, I met him around that time, and he was an alpine climber, and he kind of helped me bring all of those skills together and use them in the mountains in harmony, And I think that is the greatest skill of an alpine climber, right? It's like, how do you blend all of these skills that hopefully you have? Like, we all have to be mega jack of all trades, and then just let them be seamless in the mountains and have the intuition that you build in the mountains, which I think is sadly quite lacking, more so these days than it was, because people did come into the mountains from just spending time in them and not necessarily having to be charging or doing the super steep 13 plus free route or whatever. And I think that does really help you to kind of feel them, like you just get like a bit of an intuition. You don't freak out if you get lost in the forest. You follow the water to the river, and you just learn how to be out there. And I think that people learn that less. But
what do you think the coming up climbing in the Rockies has done for you? Because it seems as though it's such a proving ground for so many of the greats, and it does have it has all the everything. Difficult parts of alpine climbing, and other than altitude.
Yeah, it doesn't have granite either.
Oh, okay.
So, but granite or that, like, it has really cool limestone sport climbing, but yeah, the Rockies I think they're the best training ground for hard alpine climbing in the world, probably. I just think that the access to those huge glaciated mountains, you can drive down the Icefields Parkway and then literally like half an hour be climbing like a 500-meter ice route, or find big gnarly alpine limestone faces. The gear's really complicated. Like, to climb well in the Rockies, you need to be good with gear and good on your ice axes, and you need to be able to read the snowpack really well. It's like a really complicated, dangerous snowpack. So there's just like a lot of learning that happens in the Rockies. Plus, you're hiking everywhere all the time. It's not like Chamonix where you're like, catch a lift and then you go do some sick alpine pitches and then come back down. You're like, for that same thing, you're walking for 6 hours to get to those pitches. And so it makes you really fit. It makes you be able to move over difficult terrain well. You can walk on snow well. A lot of like really fundamental skills that I think we need to learn. I was in Cody in Wyoming, actually, and that's a really good place to practice walking. It's like all this like bullet hard scree that's really hard to walk on. But yeah, those kind of things. I think that the Rockies has a lot to offer, and there's a good reason why people from there like ice axes and climbing. Like, I think the Rockies probably produces some of the best. Think about like Raf Sawinski and Will Gadd and those guys, like really, really exceptionally skilled on their tools. Like, it's incredible to watch them climb, and that's because they've climbed in the Rockies their whole lives.
Yeah, and do you want to talk about Chris?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Chris Willey is a mentor of yours early on, and you just talked about how he was this guy that brought you into this idea of harmony in the mountains and having all the skills, and quite a good climber himself. But then there's just a crazy story that goes with the end of his life, and you were involved. Are you willing to talk about that? Yeah,
of course. Yeah, Chris was my best friend, my brother. I was really, really close to him. He was quite a lot older than me, like probably 7 years older than me or something. And he was so psyched on alpine climbing, and on climbing. And he also oriented my ethics around climbing, like minimizing the use of bolts, trying to have less impact, kind of, like clean ethics and being he kind of had a very British ethic sort of to his climbing. So I took that on, thankfully, through Chris. I think they're really valuable. because I think that style of climbing gives you really powerful experiences. And I think that's why we climb, is so that we can grow from those experiences. But anyway, yeah, we climbed a lot together. My first trip with him was to Moab, but we went to Patagonia mostly over the years. That was like where we would do our big expedition. My first ever year down there, I was 23, and he bought my flight ticket because I couldn't afford it. It was like a totally mind-blowing trip, and we did the third ascent of the Canadian route on Fitzroy on the South Face, which was amazing. We had like a shiver bivvy halfway up. All of that stuff was just blowing my mind. Like every time I went somewhere, it was like, because it was the first time you're doing it, you know? And yeah, so we kind of lived like that for quite a while, climbing together. And in the winter of 2016, maybe, I might not get the year right. I'm not sure what year it was. Chris developed an opiate addiction. His life basically fell apart in every way possible, like his career, his partner, all sorts of things. And he was a cerebrovascular physiologist. So he like knows all about drugs, and I don't know how to. He was like, I'm just going to try this thing, and it was crazy. He was like, I was gone in India for Christmas, and then I came back. My parents were living in India at the time, and I came back, and he was basically addicted to the stuff. And I didn't really realize he was working out here in Squamish, and so I came out to Squamish to visit him, which is when I realized how intense the situation was. And he obviously, like, he was super addicted, but he also didn't want to be. So he came back to the Okanagan, he stayed with us and got himself off it. We kind of went to a rehab center as well at one point. Yeah, and he pulled through. Like he totally got clean, but it was a really intense experience seeing him do that. You know, this man I admire so much. Just watching him kind of implode, you know, so intensely. But he got back to it. He got back to climbing, and he started writing a book about addiction and climbing, and about the relationship between drugs and alpinism, basically, in its simplest form. And I thought that was fascinating. I had some really, really cool and interesting conversations with him about that, because I do think that there's a lot of crossover. Like, obviously one's a lot more healthy than the other one, but there's a lot of crossover between the two. And so yeah, he was working on that book, and he was clean, and we were climbing again together. We went to the Bugs. He went and soloed the Northhauser, and then we decided to go back to Patagonia in November. So we went down for the early season, like before the main season, and climbed Los Tiempos Perdidos, which is the route that I was soloing on just recently. We climbed that route together, and then we tried to finish on Directa Huarpe on Cerro Torre. Like, it's like a direct finish kind of to the Ragni. And that link up would be so cool. It'd be like Tiempos is like 900 meters, and then it'd be like another 400 meters of really cool, crazy steep Rhine climbing. So hopefully somebody does that. But anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. But yeah, so we tried. We got really close. We're like 100 meters from the summit. We bailed because we couldn't figure out. Chris was on lead, and he couldn't figure out how to climb the overhanging rime. It was super steep and just bottomless, and I don't know. He couldn't get purchase, and we decided to bail because it was getting really hot and the mountain was falling apart. So we bailed and we wrapped, and it got dark. And then in the dark, while we were rappelling, I was pulling the rope, and I pulled a rock off that was very lightly somehow attached to the rope up high as I was pulling it. And the rock came down and smoked Chris in the head, like in the side of his helmet, and smashed the side of his helmet, knocked him clean unconscious. And then he was out for maybe a couple of minutes, and then he came to and had completely forgotten everything, didn't know he was in Argentina. He had blood coming out of his ear and his nose, and he was totally out of it. So at that point in time, I don't know, I was young. I was really young. I was 23, like I said, or 24 maybe, actually. And I got him off the anchor and wrapped with him to a ledge, put him in all of our down. I just sat there in like a fleece, shivering overnight, and gave him all of our sugar, and we just sat there, and he luckily improved. But I was sitting on that ledge for the whole night thinking that he might not make it through the night. And definitely back then, I mean, maybe in recent years people have called helicopters, but I didn't at that time send any rescue because I didn't think that it was an option. And I don't think it really was an option, but it's been interesting seeing people get rescued these recent years anyways. But yeah, so we sat on the ledge all night, and then we descended down to the glacier. And because of the accident and everything, because of bailing, we had gone down to the other side, which was away from our base camp. We had eaten our last food like on the summit push, hoping to like just wrap and then get back to our food. But instead we had to do like this big mission out. It took us like 2 days of walking to hike all the way around the massif and then back to town. And Chris just improved the whole time, luckily. But yeah, it was really, really freaky. I didn't know that if he was going to survive or not at the beginning. Got back to Chaltén and recollected there, and then came back to Canada. I went out to my ex's family for Christmas, and yeah, then we got the news that he had relapsed and overdosed. So he overdosed like 2 weeks after we got from Patagonia. Yeah, and that was super, super intense.
Did he have, I mean, what was wrong? I mean, did you guys,
How do you mean?
Did he just walk away from it?
Yeah, in the end, he kind of just walked away from it. Yeah, he was heavily concussed, but yeah, in the end, he didn't have any like neck injuries or anything. Yeah, he didn't climb. We were in El Chalten for I think 2 more weeks, and he kind of just sat in dark spaces and eventually started writing again. And I went climbing again. I went and climbed Pier Giorgio with a friend, Juho Knutila. So
do you think it was at all related, or it was just that he relapsed because he was back in society?
I don't know. I really don't know.
Right.
Like, I think they did a scan of what was in his blood, and he could have even been taking a different drug, and it had this fentanyl stuff in it. Because it's a huge problem. It's still a huge problem.
Right.
And so it is possible that he didn't even like truly relapse to the opiates, but we'll never know.
Right.
And in the end, at least my opinion is that it doesn't matter. He's just not here with us anymore. And that's just what matters. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So your mentor is gone.
Mentor's gone. Yeah. And I mean, I have lots of mentors.
Right.
But yeah, he was definitely the one for that period of time.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And it wasn't a super exceptional human, like really, really smart, PhD, like all the accolades in academia. And it was cool talking to him too, because he studied blood flow in the brain at altitude. And so he had a lot of intel and knowledge about that whole world as well, and spent quite a lot of time in the Khumbu himself to do the research. So he had lots of ideas. We never actually went to the Himalayas together, but...
Mm-hmm. But you kept climbing in Patagonia, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that seems to be the place. For a really long time for you.
Yeah, I've been going basically every year since I was 23 now, yeah.
Right. I mean, describe that. Like, why is it? Yeah, I mean, the obvious things, right? But,
yeah. No, I have, like, Hugo Hugo Acostila. I can't probably kind of say his name properly anyway, but Hugo runs a hostel called Hemheru in Patagonia, and he was really good buddies with Marc-Andre too. We share Marc as a mutual friend. And I just love hanging out with him. I basically have like a second family there. I speak Spanish now. I love the culture. I like disconnecting, and obviously the climbing is insane. Like the Torres as an objective, to have wild, huge, big walls and such difficult granite climbing into like steep ice goulottes and then wild overhanging rime mushrooms to climb to the summit. Like, I can't think of. Sure, there's no altitude in that mix, but everything else is about as cool and wild and intense as it could get, So they're just like, I think they're some of the sickest mountains in the world. I've still got lots of mountains to check out, so I can't say it for sure. But yeah, I've just fallen in love with the place and the people and the mountains. Yeah.
What are some of your greatest hits from down there?
Greatest hits?
Yeah.
You mean like
climbs that meant a lot to you?
Well, the tunes I've been playing with Sean, which ones were the most popular? No, I like the similar thing, and time in the Torres. Like, interestingly, my first ever route that I tried to do in Patagonia was with Chris, and we tried to climb Festival, which is a Timmy O'Neill route down on Stanhart, and we got stormed off. Like, we were climbing, we were like, oh yeah, it's windy, it's super windy, dude. And then we're like, yeah, but we're in Patagonia, we should probably just keep climbing. We just kept climbing, and then we topped out on the ridge and saw this huge wall of storm coming at us. And by the time we were like on the glacier, it was fully raging and blowing us all over the glacier. That was a really wild experience to see it. But personally, like, my greatest hits, kind of what I'm proud of, I think I did a route on Ego with Brett that I really enjoyed. But the next day, or the next night really, I soloed Exocet on Stanhart, and that was beautiful. It's an incredible line. Like, the ice climbing is perfect. It's in the back of a chimney. Yeah, it was just a really, really beautiful experience. The other guys hiked out of the valley. Basically, everybody was done with the window and hiked out of the valley. I was using the last night of the window, like the storm was coming the next morning, so I climbed overnight. And yeah, it was just I had just climbed this amazing route on Ega, and then I just had this super soulful solo experience on Stanhart afterwards. And I think that was definitely one of the most beautiful experiences.
So you climbed the route you guys named...
Mas Vision.
Yeah.
MA's Vision, or
right.
Mas Vision.
Yeah, Brett talked about that on her show a couple of years ago.
Cool, yeah. Yeah, no, it was really fun doing that with her. It was like over 2 years, and then the second year we did it with a local called Horacio. Yeah, it was an awesome experience, and really nice to hang with Brett after Mark had passed in those years too. It was nice to spend that time with her for sure.
And you were buds with Mark.
Yeah. He took care of me. I had just broken my foot and was living in Agassiz with Brett, and we'd go hang out with them all the time over there, and wander around the football field with my crutches. Yeah, I don't know, good times.
Yeah. How did he sort of inspire your climbing, do you think? What did you take from being close to that guy?
I feel like, I mean, a lot of inspiration for sure, like, and a real awesome connection. Like when we would hang out and talk about our objectives, it was really, really cool to like, we'd get super excited together and then bounce back and forth ideas and talk about different things we had. And back then we were both like really fired up on soloing, or the thought of soloing. And we'd just get really, really psyched together and motivate each other, you know. I find similarly, like when I go to athlete events and all the athletes hang out, I get really motivated from talking to people who have that much drive and that much psych. And I had that with Mark a lot. Like whenever we hung out, we both got really psyched. And what else? I think like his motivation being really pure, like Mark really just loved it. And I think everybody has that in them. And some people have more of the other stuff. They climb for the other reasons too. But Mark was insanely pure in his motivation. And that was really special. And I admire that too. Like I like to think that I have the same and that we share that, but you know, maybe I don't. How do you really know?
Right. How do you really know?
But I really admired that in Mark for sure.
Yeah. And tell me about hearing that news.
That was really crusher, honestly. That was like 5 months after Chris passed or something like that. And I had processed a lot of Chris passing with Mark, like we hung out and spoke about it and stuff. And then, when he went missing, I was working in Vancouver. It was super rainy. I had a broken foot. I was just hangboarding, you know. It was a low point. And then that news on top of it just like rang at home. I felt it was a bad time for sure. That was a bad winter. Came out of it in the spring. Fortunately, the sun and time heal a lot. Those years were intense. Hayden was a couple of years before that. And even though I didn't know Hayden, you know, like it rocked the whole community. And I guess that was the time where like mortality was like thrust right in front of my face, and I had to like deal with it. I had just gotten into a massive avalanche on Polar Circus not too long before that. So all of this stuff happening together really like pushed me into a perspective shift on risk and what the mountains can offer. Before that, it was all just glitter and gold. Like, oh, these things were incredible. Like these experiences are amazing. Life is amazing. Everything's amazing. And then, then in those years, it sort of changed a bit. Reality and real life sank in, you know?
I kind of just want to like figure out how you just turn it around into like even more intense pursuit. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's what we do. It's like what everyone does. That I mean, you can quit climbing when friends are killed in the mountains.
You can,
or if you're involved in accidents, it happens, and it's a completely legitimate thing to say, that was good enough. But
I hope that one day I have the ability, like kind of in coming back to the addiction thing that we mentioned earlier, with how alpine climbing or just climbing in general can be very addictive, or is kind of like an addiction, or taking drugs or whatever you want to call it. But I do hope for my sake that I can eventually say, like I'm done, or I'm totally fine to not do anything gnarly. And I don't know when that time is going to come. I wouldn't say that it's here now, but I am ready to like redefine how often and when and what risk I take. And it's still like it's a never ending evolution. And I would actually say that like I'm not, even though maybe the stuff that I'm doing is intense or more intense than the stuff that I was doing in my early 20s and in those years, I don't think it is actually more intense. I was being crazy then, you know, like I just didn't know as much. Now I'm a lot more experienced, and I'm better at reading when things are dangerous and when they're not. Obviously I'm not perfect. None of us are. But I think that's kind of like I'm doing more intense things, but I think also I'm actually kind of in a lot of ways safer, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, who do you look up to in like if you want to like a guide for like growing old as an alpine climber? There's a few around. I mean, Swenson's in town where you live, and
Swenson, Michael Kennedy, Barry Blanchard,
right?
Yeah, Steve House. There's a lot of climbers that stuck it, and I think that they all kind of.
Man, they all came close though.
Yeah,
not all of them. I don't know if Steve's had a really bad accident. I don't remember from
Steve House.
No,
Swenson. Yeah, no, he's definitely, and he's
Mr. Clean, I think.
Totally, yeah. It's actually really impressive, and he kind of like, he picks an objective and then he goes and does that one, and it's the whole year, his whole work year and everything revolves around it. And I think that there's a lot to be said for that, because it's a numbers game too, you know, like if you put yourself out there all the time and you just don't do it that much, but you go super hard, and when you do, you do improve your chances that way, you know. But yeah, you're right. They did all have really close calls, and that's why I'm saying, like, I think if you're going to try and push alpinism, it's recognizing the risk is really, really important, even if some people have managed to stick it. But I do think that they all also moderated their substance abuse, you know. Like, I think that in order to be able to stick it, all of them did at some point say no, or that they did back off. They listened to the voices in their heads, and they were cautious as well, even though the stuff that they were doing was super gnarly. It's an interesting dichotomy, you know. You've got like people doing I think Alex Honnold even is a good example of it too, like really intense, dangerous things, and then feeling like what they're doing is like in control and within their capability, and trying to do that. I don't know. I don't know the answer.
Right.
I don't think it really is within our control in the end.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I was just thinking, you talked about House, like he had to have he had the accident that changed everything.
Him,
yeah. So it wasn't like, okay, it's time for me to chill out. He had this like moment.
Mm-hmm.
At the right age or wrong age, however you want to look at it.
Right.
To sort of like change his perspective, whether he liked it or not in some ways.
Totally. And I think that that's awesome. You know, I would be really thankful if I had a perspective shift like that. I think it would show a lot of maturity and control of my ego. We all have egos, and I'd be proud of myself if I got to that place. I don't want that though. You know, like, it's very clear to me that I don't want to quit at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
I have a vision still to follow, you know, but yeah, one day, hopefully I have that in me. That would be great. Quickly aside, I reclimbed that little because when Steve fell off on Temple, he went off route, and I accidentally went off route the exact same way. And I'm fairly sure I climbed through the part where he would have fallen off of, because it was really, really messed up, and there was no gear, and it was super slabby, like after pulling this roof thing. Yeah, it was kind of wild to be up there and thinking about Steve and that wild fall. Luckily not punting myself. But yeah, it's crazy. It's a beautiful mountain, that north face of Temple.
Did you have you told him this?
No, I haven't told him.
Really?
No, I don't think I've told anyone that, actually. Now it's on the internet.
Now it's on the internet that you just sent.
I sent
Steve's demise.
I could easily have not have.
Right, yeah. So, you know, back to I kind of want to ask you about this one solo, actually. And I don't know if sometimes the wording, talking about some of these solos that I read anyway, was, he soloed it, he free soloed it.
Mm-hmm.
That is a distinction in the mountains even, right?
Oh, big difference,
as opposed to
well, I guess if you're using ice axes, is that free soloing or is that just soloing? I don't know.
I think it's like I think it has to do with the rope.
Okay, yeah.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, no
if you
rope.
bust a rope out, a rope solo part of it.
Yeah, I would agree, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Is that like, do you look for stuff that's like free solo? Do you prefer that, or is it just depends on what you want to do?
Yeah, I think it depends. It's more about like being there. I think the soloing is so powerful because it's just you and the space and the energy and the climbing. And yeah, if like in Patagonia, I almost always take a rope because the descents need them, and I don't really feel like down soloing those mountains like Jim did. Yeah, I
mean Jim Reynolds.
Yeah, Jim Reynolds down on the Afanasieff.
That's a great story.
It's so cool. Yeah.
Down climbing wet edges through the night.
I know. Yeah. I'm not a big fan of down climbing in general, but so I take ropes in that scenario. But then I think if you don't need to, it's a really wildly liberating feeling to completely just to free solo. And in the context of like if I'm taking a rope, and it's not just like, for example, on Exocet, I just took a 60-meter tagline, which was awesome for the climbing, but then coming down was a nightmare because I had to rig like every 30 meters. I was building a V-thread, and then eventually I was stopping like 5 meters short of every anchor that I was the next anchor, on the way down. But then in the Rockies, of the stuff I've done, usually there's just a nice mellow walk off, and so you can free solo without even taking a rope altogether if that's what you want. It does commit you. You get really committed on a big face if you don't have a rope with you. And yeah, I don't know. Then the Egger was like a full rope system. I had a single rack and some screws and 2 ropes, and that was really encumbering, but also allowed me to climb the mountain that way, And so, I don't know, whatever makes sense.
Well, let me ask you about this striving for the moon route.
Oh, cool.
What mountain is that on?
Mount Temple. It's
Mount
on the
Temple,
east face
okay.
of Mount Temple.
So yeah, let me ask you, striving for the moon on the east face of Mount Temple. The thing that I read that I thought was kind of interesting about that is that you'd attempted this route.
With Chris, actually. Chris and Frank Cox.
But not done it.
No, we climbed through the crux, but we took way too long.
Okay.
And we had kind of planned to bivvy in the day and then climb through the night. But we were so late that we had to keep climbing when day broke, and then we would have had to bivvy at night, and it was definitely going to be too cold, and we didn't take bivvy gear, so we ended up kind of not being able to do it. And then when I went back, I had already climbed the crux. It was in totally different condition, but I kind of knew what I was getting into, and I was way faster because I was soloing, so I didn't have to worry about bivvying or anything.
So, well, let me ask you about the process of that. Like you tried it, you guys failed, for various reasons, some of which is just, that moving with a team of 3 on ropes is slow. I mean, are you already thinking about it while you're coming down of like, this is all reasonable, I could do all this sort of stuff? But then what do you do to sort of like prepare in your mind for something like that?
With striving, like when you're driving down the Trans-Canada, it's up on the left as you're looking at Temple. It's like a beautiful straight line of ice and snow. Like Barry Blanchard, who did the first ascent, describes it as like a pearl necklace draped over the side of the mountain or something like that. And it does look like that. It's gorgeous. And so like you're driving past all the time. I've tried it already with my buddy. Back then I was thinking like, yeah, that looks like something I would enjoy soloing. And I think some mountain routes really call out to be soloed, and that's one of them. It's just like a sustained ice climb. I didn't have ice the whole way. There was one kind of hairy mixed pitch that I didn't expect to have to climb. But basically, it's just like a beautiful 1,600 meter ice climb the whole way to the summit of Temple. Yeah, it doesn't really get much better than that. So it's hard. I find it hard not to see that and really want to go solo it, And I know that Marc-Andre did too. We chatted about striving for sure.
He wanted to.
Oh, he thought it was a sick idea,
right,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So did you bring a rope?
No.
On that one?
No.
Okay.
I didn't even bring I went kind of all in on that one. It was really cool. It was really, really cool, but it was intense.
What do you mean by that?
I had obviously ice axes and crampons, so I was using assistance of that kind. And I had a harness too, but I think I forgot my tat or something. Often you'll take like a 5 meter section. So if you have to get down a short little bit, you can. And I probably had like a double length sling on me or something, but I felt really committed. Like I felt like I climbed through the grades 5 or 6 or whatever it is crux. And then, I wouldn't have wanted to down climb that pitch. So once I climbed that pitch, I was really quite committed. And then got to the mixed pitch I was telling you about, like, maybe 100 meters higher. And that was actually like it was probably like an M6 pitch or an M5 pitch or something like that. I was up there and I just kind of had to climb it, and I did, and it was an amazing, powerful experience. But yeah, I was really, when I would say all in, I was like kind of all in that respect. Like I was up there. I had never seen that pitch the mixed pitch I had never climbed before because we turned around before that with Chris. I don't know. Yeah, it just felt like a lot of new terrain and a lot of like really just trusting that you're going to be able to do it. And it felt committing in that sense. So like all in, no ropes.
What about like shorter, I don't know, kind of more intense difficulty kind of based soloing on like shorter ice routes and things like that? Is that a different approach for you? And a mutual friend of ours sort of mentioned you doing some pretty rad stuff like in Michigan when they were there.
Yeah, the Lion Queen. That is a really cool pitch.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that, I think that was a fairly logical solo because I couldn't protect it anyway.
Okay.
I would have put Jesse at risk with a falling ice on his head or something like that. Mm-hmm. And if I had screwed up at any point, I would have landed on the rocks in the water for sure.
Did you call it a logical solo?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because the logical thing would be to go to the bar.
Yeah.
And not climb it at all, but whatever.
Yeah. But it was so cool. Like the sandstone there absorbs the water. Like the wind blows all this water into the sandstone. It absorbs it. And then you get like ice tufas and ice roofs. And it's just like, I don't know. I couldn't pass it up. And Jesse had done a sick new route to the left. So I wanted to add one to the right. And I knew like I did top rope it before I soloed it.
Okay.
So I knew it was, it wasn't like striving for the moon.
So specifically, but I mean, do you have a method to like preparation, or is it just what you're feeling in the moment?
Yeah. It is a lot about what I'm feeling in the moment. And there are way more times that I don't feel it than I do. Like, I think because soloing is such a big, like, flashy thing in climbing, it can seem like I'm like a big soloist, but I would say that actually not so much. You know, I don't want to do it most of the time. So it was the right moment. I really wanted to do it at that time. And other times that I've soloed have been the same thing. Like, I'm really sure that that's what I want when I do it.
So we've been concentrating on Patagonia, but you have a resume in Peru, in the Himalayas. And what about some climbs that have stood out for you in other parts of the world?
Just recently, or not that recently, but I guess 2 years ago now, I was in the Cordillera Waiwash with Alec, and we climbed a route we called Reino Hongo on Jirishanka. Same time as Josh Wharton and Vince Anderson, who are in the Real Rock film climbing that mountain. Yeah. We actually topped out the summit at exactly the same time as those guys. You can't see it in the film. I don't know how they miraculously managed to pull that off, but we were there on the summit at the same time as those guys.
I don't know why, because I think it's like cool.
Yeah, I know. It's probably just like a whole extra story that they didn't want to tell.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, which I understand. You know, you only have so much time. But yeah, that was totally insane. Like the mushrooms on that route were like buildings, and we were weaving around the buildings, and the whole experience was amazing. It was a very committing route in general. Like, if we had to bail, we would have had to go over the other side, and it would have been a huge walk around. There was some inclement weather that we weren't sure what was going to turn into, and we went for it, and it went well. And sometimes it just goes well like that. It was really, really beautiful when it happens, because a lot of the time I'm like, oh shit, now we have to go back next season, and we'll try it again next season. We learned that much, you know. And then the other route that I did in Peru, also with Alec, we called the Devil's Reach Around, and it's on the east face of Chacarajú Este. And that, I was really quite young when we climbed that, and that one, I think maybe was one of the routes that kind of put me on the map a little bit for sponsorship and things like that. And was also epic, because it was like that whole face hadn't been free climbed, and we free climbed it. It hadn't, you know, the route was independent and completely new, and neither of us are really that experienced with finding new lines. And it's just like a gorgeous, picturesque tooth of a mountain, and we were just like, let's go for it. And Alec was like, I don't know, man, that looks really hard. And I was young and psyched and idealistic, and it worked out. So yeah, I don't know. Those are my two favorite routes from Peru. For Nepal, like I've only made attempts. I've never actually climbed anything there, but the attempts have been really amazing. And hanging out with the locals in Nepal has been really amazing too. I was there during the pandemic.
Right. You guys kind of got stuck there.
Yeah, we got stuck there, and it was really cool. The whole Khumbu was empty. We developed a really, really incredible relationship with a family in Tame. I don't know if anybody has been watching the news, but Tame just recently got swept out by a flood, which is really sad. So Perry, a friend of ours who just recently climbed there, has just started a GoFundMe for them. So if anybody feels like donating to Tame, the poor town has been completely wiped out by a flood. But anyway, yeah, we became really close to that family, and they took us up to the monastery, and we did ceremonies with them and ate with them. And it was a really special time, even though it rained every day and we couldn't go climbing.
I can't remember, because you guys sent us a tape of it, actually, of just sitting there festering.
Yeah.
And it was like the lockdown started and you couldn't necessarily fly out. And
yeah, we had to get on a chartered flight to Dubai, and then we got a different flight back. I think it was, I couldn't afford all of the extra expense that we had to pay. And then when we came back to Canada, I had to get like a hotel. They forced you to stay in a hotel. It was like $3,000 extra to just do that. And I don't know. Yeah, it was all a bit of a gong show, honestly. But really, now that it's far, far ahead, I don't remember any of that stuff. I just remember the beauty of being there.
One last little like kind of tangent or whatever is that you did go to college. You did get an engineering degree, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you are using that for sort of product development.
Yeah.
So, you do have at least a backup plan of sorts, right?
Yeah, and I always have. And I think that has been huge. You know, like I've never relied on my climbing income. And I think, and I still think that that's really important. Like I don't need it at all. I wouldn't have as much fun, but I could go and be an engineer if I wanted to. So by some miracle, honestly, I climbed like all the way through school. I don't know what I learned in uni, but I'm an engineer, And currently
not the kind that drives trains.
No. Well, it wouldn't be fun to drive a train. I've never driven a train. Childhood dreams, Anyway, I've been working on the design team with Arc'teryx for the last 2 years on and off, like between climbing, and it's been incredible. Arc'teryx is an amazing sponsor. They're trying to create us as humans for times beyond like what we're doing now as well. And that feels really cool. So I've been doing kind of design engineering for them, working on harnesses and breaking a ton of harnesses and having a lot of fun doing that.
And is it something that's like you're trying to get your perfect harness, something that you
Yeah,
need
we've got some cool harnesses coming up.
Right.
Yeah, they're going to be sweet.
Right on. So last kind of question, there's another line that I pulled out. Actually, you know what I want to ask you? I want to ask you actually, what's up with Alec Berg?
Oh yeah, Alec
like
Berg.
He's like I mean, somebody sent me something and was like, yeah, you should talk to this guy. And then I'm like, I don't know. He's like, I mean, I get those requests a lot. Like, this guy's like super undercover. You should get in touch with him. I'm like, well, that doesn't mean he's going to talk to me because he's undercover for a reason.
Yeah.
And a lot of times,
I don't know what he would say if you asked him, honestly.
But he's like popped up. Yeah, I just see his name.
He's a brilliant climber. He's probably one of Canada's best all-around climbers for sure. You know, of my generation. Too.
Young, old, like what? He's like an enigma.
3 years older than me,
okay.
so like mid-30s.
Mid-30s. All right.
Yeah. He does rope access. He makes all of his money very efficiently doing rope access, and then he climbs I feel like he works less than I do, you know, like he's climbing a lot. Sadly, right now he's injured, but yeah, he's a phenomenal partner, a really great friend too. Like Alec and I climbed with Chris together way back in the day, and I've climbed with Alec consistently all throughout. And so, yeah, I really value his companionship and his partnership in climbing. He's an insanely good climber too. He soloed El Cap when he was like 14 or something, you know? Yeah, with his dad. Well, not with his dad, but yeah, he would go down to the valley with his dad earlier than that, and then his dad stopped coming down, and he would still, even as a teenager, like between high school, go down to the valley. And so he like cut his teeth soloing in the valley, and then he came out to the Rockies and got into alpine climbing out there. But it is a really cool skill set. He was big into the aid soloing stuff, which I've never really got that into, and it's nice to have that skill set on your team for sure.
What about other partners?
Canmore has an insanely awesome community of like pretty committed alpine climbers. Mm-hmm. I'd say in my generation, like Alec and Ethan Berman, and we had Ushteen Hawthorne there for a little while, but now he's back in Scotland again. Martin Van Huren, like they're all my generation, and we all get on really well. And they're all from Canmore. Right now, I'm kind of moved to the coast to Squamish, but yeah, that community in Canmore is an incredible one, and I value all of those partnerships. I've got a really good buddy, Kif Alcocer, who now lives in Patagonia, and I climb with him a ton too. Will Stanhope I've climbed with. Jesse Huey is a really great friend. I look like all of my good climbing partners are also my best friends, you know. So I've got lots, luckily. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
All right, last question. You had a line in another thing I read that alpine climbing is the best way, or the only way, maybe you said, that you can find to understand myself better.
Mm-hmm.
Can you sort of expand on that in terms of
what that means,
what that means, and how it works, and again, as you've been sort of doing a little bit of soul searching around your commitment,
midlife crisis, soul searching,
midlife crisis.
Yeah,
you're only halfway to midlife. So,
yeah, okay.
Yeah, you're a little more than halfway, but still. Yeah. But yeah, tell me what that means to you.
So I think if you're soloing in the mountains, as soon as you get scared, as soon as you feel like if you're there for the wrong reasons, you're going to turn around, I think. At least I certainly would. As soon as I feel like I'm not there for the right reasons, or I don't want to be there, I turn around. And so it's interesting because and the reason I turn around is because you see so clearly why you're there. As soon as you and it kind of takes actually getting there to see it, you know, like you could sit in your backyard and think about it, and maybe you could see how you feel. But as soon as you're out there and you're on the wall, or you're putting your laces on, about to start climbing or something, then you really feel it. It's like, do I really want to do this? And you can see not only that, but you can, I feel like you can see why, especially on some of the longer solos where you're like really on it all the time, and you're like in this state, you feel the pressure of the exposure, or the pressure of where you are for a sustained period of time. I find it does really like put you into a mindset that is way more clear than normal life with all of the distractions. You see super clearly like the role that your ego is playing and why you're there. You see super clearly the relationships that you value and who you want to hang with when you get back home. Like everything kind of makes sense in a lot of ways, just because you're like, I think, under that much pressure, and it has to. And so you're sort of forced to like understand your life. And that's a really, really powerful thing to see. You kind of see, I would describe it as seeing clarity or seeing truth or something like that. Like you see a lot of the things that are confusing and you don't understand become clear when you put yourself out there like that. And that's a really cool thing. And it gives you, when you see it and you have a perspective on your life in that way, it gives you much more control over it. So things like your ego or like why you would be there, if you see it for what it is, then you understand it and you can work with that way more easily than not even knowing where it is or what it's doing.
Do you think that's a gift you have, or do you think other alpinists feel this? Because I feel like there's tales of like, you know, enlightenment through, you know, what you did, the crucibles that you put yourself through as an alpine climber. And then I see as many or more tales of destruction.
Yeah.
You know? So what do you think? Is that a sort of
I
like
think
something you've
destruction
refined?
is just someone whose ego is like way too big and is in control, you know? And I think also the destruction comes if you're not doing it for pure love or for a motivation that's pure. And there have been times where I felt that destruction too, you know, like I've seen that as well, you know, and I do think that if you're open to like, I kind of think that you're forced to reckon with it, you know, like if even if you just imagine you're soloing like a 510 at the crag and you're on some like tricky little edges in the middle, or you're about to pull onto these tricky little edges and you're there hanging out at a rest. Like what are you going to think in that moment? You know, you're going to think like, fuck, do I want to do this or do I not want to do this? And then if you're like alpine climbing and you're actually just standing on a ledge and you're chilling, you can take that further and think about, why do I want to do this? You know, and then you take that further. So anybody who takes the time to like really think about the feelings and the thoughts that they're having through the process of soloing, I think would eventually get to understanding in that way. But you just have to actually take the time to think about it. I don't know.
Do you think you have the force of will to, I mean, I'm trying to imagine like being on a climb with a partner though, and having these revelations or second guessing your partner's motivations. I mean, are you
the partner
able to
really like? I think for me at least,
Right.
my ability to get to have that understanding and clarity is it's important that I'm alone. I love climbing with a partner, but it's just a kind of a distraction from those thoughts. Yeah.
What I'm getting at though is if you felt those that way and like, wait, we're here, you know, this isn't right. I mean, have you pulled the plug? Are you like?
Yeah, I have.
Like
I pulled the plug on Tom Livingston on the east face of Faye. He wasn't very happy about it.
Right.
But yeah, no, I have actually. I have pulled the plug quite a lot. Yeah.
Just because of that, you're like, this is.
Yeah, just wrong feeling, wrong motivation, not psyched on the level of risk or whatever it might be. Yeah. But it's really important to be able to pull the plug, and it's important to be able to descend. You know, like I think a lot of people, especially early on in climbing, go do a ton of awesome multi-pitches. They get into big routes even, and they don't really know how to bail and rig their own anchors efficiently and effectively and conserve their gear. And I was quite lucky in my early days of climbing. I don't think I ever really had to bail all that much, but lots of people are unlucky and they have to bail all the time and they get really good at it. And it's always nice to climb with a partner who knows how to get down a mountain quickly. So I don't know. That's another tangent. What was I talking about?
I was talking about like pulling the plug. I mean, pulling the plug like when it's mostly a feeling and not
a feeling thing,
and mostly and not necessarily like, oh, we're running late or we're doing this or we're doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I have done that, not maybe that much,
right?
But I do respect it. Right. Like, if my partner says that, which also has obviously happened, I'm super respectful of it. I think everybody has every right to have a feeling and that be the reason you bail. Like, I believe in the feeling. Every time I've had a close call, I've had a feeling before the close call. Just a weird thing, you know, but I can't even describe it, but there's just been this weird, like, knowledge that something messed up might happen, you know. Same thing on Cerro Torre this year with the accident, like, same thing with the avalanche. Like, every time I've had a close call, I felt like I've kind of, I don't know what to say, but I've kind of known. I've had a weird feeling and I've ignored it and kept climbing.
I guess I do have one more question. What do you know, we're kind of wrapping up here, but what do you think you do to sort of honor these dead friends as far as your climbing?
I just keep my motivation pure, keep living with love. Both of them lived with love first. And I think that's the solution to happiness and to everything, to good relationships. Just live with your heart And I try and do that, live passionately, and make them proud. They inspire me, and they will always inspire me for the rest of my life.
All right, folks, thanks for listening, and thanks to Quentin for sitting down, being candid, opening his heart a little bit. You can follow Quentin on Instagram at Quentin Climbing. He just jetted off to Thailand, so maybe he is taking it easy on the alpine side of things. Somehow I doubt it. It's probably just a brief respite. And by the way, there's been a long while where the first 40 or so Enormocasts were not on Spotify. They are there now. So for some reason you couldn't find them anywhere else and you're a completist or want to go back into the deep origins of the Enormocast, they're there now. And if you are on the Spotify listener end of things, don't forget to rate and review us over there. Leave some comments. That keeps the podcast popping up on other people's feeds more often. So it's an easy way to support the show. Okay, I guess maybe I'll see you in Michigan next week, maybe at the run out there in Boulder. Please come say hi if you're at either of those events. And I hope you're having a great winter, getting out there, having some fun, maybe looking forward to spring already like I am. Be kind to each other out there. Remember that the other is not your enemy. And of course, check your knots.
Because we are food for worms, lads. Because believe it or not, each and every one of us in this room is one day going to stop breathing, turn cold, and die. I'd like you to step forward over here and peruse some of the faces from the past. They're not that different from you, are they? The world is their oyster. They believe they're destined for great things, just like many of you. Their eyes are full of hope, just like you. Did they wait until it was too late to make from their lives even one iota of what they were capable? Because you see, gentlemen, these boys are now fertilizing daffodils. But if you listen real close, you can hear them whisper their legacy to you. Go on, lean in. Listen. You hear it?
Seize the day, boys. Make your lives extraordinary. The teachers told me that's where it's at.